Okay, good morning. Actually, is it morning there? No, it's not morning there.
It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
Although I
Good
was up the whole
afternoon.
night, so I feel like it's morning. I don't know why. So
Oh my gosh.
I
Well,
didn't put
welcome.
makeup on for you today because I'm
I
like,
love it.
my eyes are so puffy. I slept horrible last night.
Listen,
Just
it's
waking up.
we've already been talking about it. Kelly, welcome. I'll have you introduce yourself in just a second, but we've already been talking about what a rough week it's been for us, and I think probably a lot of people. So we're just gonna do the best we can today with
Yeah, I
this,
love it.
shall we? Okay.
Well, at least everyone will be able to relate to us, that's for
I
sure.
know, right?
I've been really
We're gonna be
emotional.
so real today. So real. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm
s-
real.
yeah. So can you introduce yourself before we start chatting?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Kelly Biltz and I live in North Carolina, Pinehurst to be exact. Ironically, I
Thank
don't even know.
you.
With
Representing.
I never do interviews with sweatshirts on, and I'm like, it's just so cold and cozy. I need to be cozy. All
That's
that being
hello.
said, I
Yes.
know as soon as I saw you, I'm like, oh, thank goodness.
Yes.
Um, and I am an ADHD teen life coach, and I work and coach with high schoolers throughout the academic school year. And so they're pretty much the only people that I talk to privately. So yes, I talk to more high schoolers than adults. And so truly, not kidding.
Yeah.
And so I help them build confidence by really learning the executive function skills and healthy habits and
Hmm.
helping them understand how their brain is wired because it's not this life sentence of doom that a lot of people probably think that it is, but having routines and structure and some planning tips and things like that really help these students feel confident and reduce the stress. So I
Yeah.
I love I don't know. I'm drawn to these high schoolers for some
Yeah.
reason. And yeah, so that's pretty much, I run parent programs as well, but
Okay.
I work one-on-one with students with high school.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And you're married and
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
yes. Yeah.
Yes, this is our 25th year. So we're literally celebrating the whole year.
Yay.
We have like 10-day trips every like 3 times this year.
I
Just
love it.
celebrate. So yeah, so we've been married for 25 years.
Cool.
We have a 20-year-old who is a second year student, college student up at Purchase College, which is in New York. And he
Okay.
is an actor and in a conservatory program, which is highly intensive.
Cool. Yeah.
And then we have a senior, we have two boys, and we have a senior, and he is still here for the next 8 months, and then
Yeah.
is going to be a freshman at High Point University here in North Carolina.
Okay.
So,
Is
and my
that
husband,
close to? I'm
yes,
sorry.
thank goodness I can drive
It's
to him.
close by. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, it's like an hour and 10. That's right, you're on the West Coast. See, why would you know about that? You
I
don't need to
I
know,
don't
but
know.
that's fine. He's an hour and 15. Maybe if I go 75, an hour and 10.
Okay,
An
perfect.
hour
You
and
can
10,
do
yeah.
it.
And then so my husband has ADHD, and our youngest was diagnosed back in elementary school, and I'm quite certain our oldest one has it as well, but he
Mhm.
has other things, and I'm like, you got to figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
I can't. Like, we gotta, we got to stay in our lane, and you can
Yeah.
be this later, but here are the tips you need, right?
Yeah.
So, and I am not neurodiverse. And so our household is really balanced quite well.
Yeah.
And I've learned just how to parent into it. Because when my son was
Hmm.
diagnosed, I mean, I was doing everything wrong, like
Mm.
parenting wrong, not understanding him. And so I researched it for like 3 years
Hmm.
and just learned everything I could. And I started changing my parenting style and my language and started really just looking at it. So, what's going on with him right now versus
Yeah.
wanting to fix everything? Some of these situations just needed time's the only thing that'll fix it, right? And calming down.
Yeah.
So, my son was very, very emotionally explosive when he was younger. And
Okay.
so, it was always like, okay, who's going to show up? Is he going to have a meltdown and fall flat on the floor in the middle of the grocery store
Hmm.
where he's unconsolable?
Hmm.
And that was pretty much his childhood. So, but we don't have that anymore. And I'm so happy he's a high schooler.
Whew. Yeah. You got through those years,
So,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it helped me be a better parent. And honestly, it led me to what I'm doing today. So, all things are, work for the good there, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's sort of in a nutshell my story.
Yeah. Well, and you're just months away from being an empty nester.
I know. Okay, so part of the reason why I was having a bad part of the reason why I was in a really not horrible mood, but sad mood is, so our oldest, he's been gone for 2 years, and
Okay.
we're super close to both of our sons. And I'm going to do basket case when it's just my
Yeah.
husband and I. But Brady just left on Tuesday, and so that was just a really emotional day. And then he gets up there and he's crying. And he's, I don't want
Oh,
to be here right now. And I'm like,
yeah.
but as you know, my mama heart is like, okay, I know what to say in this situation.
I know.
Cry it out. Just do what you
Yeah.
need to do, get it out. And, it's just this, give and take, pull and tug of 20-year-old, almost 21-year-old, and just the emotions,
Yeah.
all of it, navigating parenthood. Like, we don't ever have a break of learning more about our children, no matter
Yeah.
how
Their
old and how
age. Yeah.
young.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's been an emotional week, and I've just been in a really big funk. Get
Oh,
out of it.
yeah.
I'll get out
Yeah.
of it. But that's okay. I know that your audience can completely 100% understand that. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, my
We take
heart
it one
hurts.
day at a time
Yes,
is what we
literally
do.
1 hour, depending on the
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
Oh.
gosh. Do you and your husband have grand plans when you guys have the house all to yourselves?
So we love to travel. So we will probably our traveling will probably consist of 2.5, 3 weeks here and there. And
Yeah.
part of what I'm trying to figure out is how do I continue my business
Yeah.
while still, because I've built it and it's taken me 5 years to build, and I'm not ready to cut the strings, but how do I
Sure.
have that balance? And I know that, I took 3 weeks off during Christmas, and I was pretty bored. So I know that I can't. So all that being said, I'm going to continue in some capacity in my
Yeah.
business, but we have a lot of plans to travel, and we play golf a lot. So we play in a lot of
Mm.
golf tournaments and couple
Hmm.
tournaments and things like that, and all
That's
kinds of good
cool.
places. So
Yeah.
yeah, and same family, and going up to see our kids and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also have 5 grandchildren. I have older 40 and a 36-year-old stepchildren. So there's 5 of them at any
Yeah.
given point. We're like, hey, like just next month we'll be up in Nashville for a week, taking care of a 4 and a 2-year-old.
Oh my gosh. You're going back.
Yeah, I'm like, whoop, I forget that
But
very easily, because that was a hard year for us.
yeah, but you guys are now grandparents, so it's different
Yeah.
when you're grandparents, so I'm
It's
told.
fabulous. It is fabulous. It is fabulous because you don't have to, like, you're the heroes, man. These kids love you, and you
Yeah.
can do whatever you want, and you can send them home, and you're not, it's not your ability, it's not your responsibility to raise them and have the foundation. You can support that and
Yeah,
contribute,
totally.
but the responsibilities, yeah, it's great. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
I'm like,
it.
bye.
Yeah. Gotta
You
go.
know? Now
Here's
I
your
wipe
crying
all my,
child.
yes, now I wipe all the fingerprints and all the stuff and all that stuff. You forget how quickly time goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know
And
I keep thinking about like, okay, there's going to be a day where I will get to have like the tidiest house and it will never be cluttery and I will get to have, like nice things and a nice dining table and um but then I have to remember that I'll also have grandkids. So
we have that now, and I've always had a really tidy home. And now it's like I'm noticing when there's little, with I'm like, I don't want to be the nagging grandmother. So I'm
yeah.
like, all the little mud prints that came on
Yep.
your hard goods.
Yep.
I'm like, I'm just gonna steam them the next day. It's
Yep.
not a big thing, Kelly. It's okay. And you just have to let some of that go, because it's like,
You don't want to be that grandma.
you know what I mean, grandma.
No. No.
You know, maybe the grandma. My 20-year-old, his friend broke a lamp over Christmas break, and my husband was upset. I'm like, I'm never replacing that lamp, because that's a reminder that he and his friends were having a great time. They were literally,
Yeah.
one of the girls was just laying down, and she just accidentally hit the lamp, busted
Oh.
and whatever else. I'm like, that's my busted lamp, and that's a memory because they
Yeah.
were here. It's just like,
Yeah, there
you
you
gotta let some of
go.
that
That's
go,
a good
right?
way to look at that. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Never
Yeah.
replacing it.
Yep.
Just gonna stay. He glued it all together, so there's like this little crack in it. Really,
Even better.
I know, right? I'm like,
Yep.
look at that.
Love it. Love it. Well, fun. I am so glad that you agreed to hop on here and chat with me
Thank you for having me.
and that you have been so gracious with my craziness this week as well. So thank you for that, and that you're still here and then you didn't give up on me.
Sure. Absolutely. No, no.
Oh my goodness.
I'm pretty chill about stuff like that.
Okay, good. Well, I'm excited to talk about ADHD. As I shared with you before we started recording, ADHD is just something that we're seeing more of, and I feel like a lot of the families I'm working with are having their kids diagnosed later, like as teens, and then learning new ways to, like kind of how you said, learning new ways to parent and ways to communicate with them, and then also supporting our teens to help them navigate how they're feeling in their bodies to be able to move out into the world as successful adults. And so when I came across you and all that you do, I was like, yes, I need to talk to her because I haven't had anyone on yet to talk about
Oh
ADHD.
my
And
goodness. Okay.
yeah, so no pressure, but
I'm good. I can talk,
good,
unfortunately.
good, good.
Even I
Good.
get burned out, but it's the beginning of the year.
Yeah. Okay. I think, can we just go back to like, and you kind of alluded to this yourself, like what should, as parents, what should they be looking for in their kids, that could be signs that, we might be looking at something other than, I think one of the problems is oftentimes parents will see a big behavior or some struggle and don't always identify that there might be something behind the behavior. And so then it's more, let's figure out how do we do behavior management as opposed to what's the need behind the behavior. So I'm just curious if you could share with us what are some things that maybe we could be looking for as parents.
Sure. Okay. So, um, since my world really revolves around teenagers,
Hmm.
I'm going to sort of stay in that lane,
Yeah, please. Yeah.
even though our son was diagnosed in elementary school, second or third grade. It's all a blur. I'm not going to go
Yeah.
back and digress. Just kidding. But some of the things that can be a red flag, if I may, is teenagers who have ADHD feel emotions a lot more intensely.
Hmm.
Whereas maybe you and I or the neurotypical person might not think it's a big deal.
Hmm.
Um, and those teenagers may really have a very strong reaction. So if they're slamming doors or getting upset if you're asking them something that you would normally ask them, if they're coming home and they're saying, I hate math, this is a da da da, um, I, you know, I don't want to go back to school. If there's a lot of just emotional dysregulation, if I may,
Yeah.
that is a huge sign, because that's also the caveat to how you're relating to the teenagers, right? Because because they tend to push our buttons and triggers. So when we come at when teenagers say those things, like we want to, of course, help, we want to solve,
Yeah.
and sometimes even our approach as caring can sometimes trigger them. And then it's sort of this downfall where they're triggering us, and then we get upset and then emotions rise. So
Yeah.
understanding those with ADHD feel a lot stronger emotions. And it might seem like, why would he be upset about that? But it could be something that led up to that. So I would
Mhm.
be mindful of the emotionality of your teenager in those situations where maybe the day didn't go as planned, there was a change of plans, there was a change of
Yeah.
schedule.
Hmm.
Transitioning is really, really difficult for these teenagers. And it's probably, I feel, one of the most misunderstood factors of parenting because their brains need a lot of time to transition. Excuse me. For example, if you're sitting down for dinner, and good for you if your teenager's still sitting down for dinner with you. Hats off to you people. Even if it's once a week, you're winning. And say it's like 6:30 and you've told them and they're still not down, and then they cop an attitude because you're reminding them and they got lost in time and they forgot about it. And then it's all of those things happening. So emotions are really play a big role because there can be a lot of factors for emotional dysregulations. Somebody just printed,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on there.
You're
With
good.
regard to time management, here's one of the biggest things that parents will see when their teenagers are spending hours in their bedroom with very little to show.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, there's a huge challenge of understanding time management and not getting lost in time. So teenagers may feel like I've been studying or I've just been scrolling and taking a break for 15 minutes and it's an hour and a half later,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So that time management where literally they're getting lost in time.
Uh-huh.
And that's a big challenge because they're, there's not systems in place to help them stay on task and on time. And so it's a now and a not now situation with how they perceive time. So getting lost in time, being late, maybe not even affected if they're late, or
Mm-hmm.
affected if they're by being late. Challenges of keeping track of all of their work and planning things. Most of these teenagers, they love being organized. They love having a plan. Maintaining it is a different
Mm-hmm.
game altogether, right? So they might have a whole, they might, so planning their work, they may say, oh, I'm just going to remember.
Yeah.
And
What
maybe
are
you have
you?
to, yeah, maybe, and then I'm your frontal lobe helping you remember that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the last thing we want to do is be our teens frontal lobe, but we will always be at some degree, right? We
Yeah.
just want that to be more like the 20 versus the 80.
Mm-hmm.
So they're and some of these teenagers really will resist planning because they feel like it's too constricting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like I have a plan. I don't need a plan because I know what I have to do. It's one
Mm-hmm.
thing knowing it, it's understanding, it's a different thing of understanding how long it will take and how to
Mm-hmm.
prioritize it. And chances are they are forgetting something along the way. So there's resistance to planning, there's resistance to, systems in place or a healthy morning routine or just maintaining a 5 or 10 minute habit. There's a lot of resistance to that because in their mind they want to do it and they have every intention,
Yeah.
but then 2 hours happen and nothing gets done because they've forgotten it. So there's a lot of forgetfulness, like their working
Mm-hmm.
memory is really weak.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why a lot of reminders need to happen, which is why there needs to be a couple different tools in place. Um, I've learned that texting is like the best way for my son and I to communicate when I need him to do something because I'm
Mm-hmm.
always like, give me an emoji and confirm.
Yeah.
And he got it, right? So those are some of the, getting lost in time, resistance of like schedules and routines, feeling too constricted, and then the emotionality of, really a day that's not quite as structured, or there's a day that changed, or there's an activity that changed. There's a lot of black and white thinking in.
Yeah.
It's like sort
Yeah.
of all or nothing, and this is my schedule, and now all of a sudden I don't know how to rework it. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to, okay, so this isn't happening, but now that all of a sudden that one event that's not happening is infiltrating their whole sweet brains and they're getting stuck and overwhelmed and lack of resiliencies in that situation because they're stuck
Yeah.
and maybe don't have the ability to think 2 or 3 steps ahead, which
Yeah. Or the flexibility.
or the flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yeah.
inflexible. My son's very inflexible thinking.
Yeah.
He's a very inflexible thinker. Um, he's gotten a lot better and we work with him on that, and obviously
Yeah.
the last part is really the motivation and the
Mm-hmm.
interest. And so if your high schooler if he's on a block schedule, well, I'm not going to use block schedule, but if he has 7 classes or something, there's a high probability 3 of them will be pretty good interest, and there'll be 4 that are just really hard to maintain
Yeah.
that focus and interest and drive and motivation to do the work. And
Yeah.
that's just life of a neurodiverse teenager. Like
Mm-hmm.
their brain thrives with interest, with not being bored, right? So they're constantly seeking that dopamine, right? And
Yeah.
which is why social media and all the gaming is
Yeah.
feeding them. And the classroom itself, like I've had teenagers, and I'm sure you can relate to this, where they might dislike a subject but have a great teacher and they might be thriving in there
Mm-hmm.
because of how the teacher is presenting, and it's not boring, and they're using, the visuals, the auditory, they're kinesthetic learners, and so they're learning by doing, right? But it is really really difficult for these teenagers to have an interest where how they're being taught does not really resonate with them. So
Yeah.
getting some of that work done, paying attention in the classroom is just going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
Motivation is significant and it's real.
So, like, what steps would you recommend parents take for a diagnosis? Because, so kind of from our experience, our teenager was diagnosed with ADHD this last year, but we had to like jump through hoops and we had to,
Mhm.
we were told we had to go to this one specific place and they're the only ones that can give an ADHD diagnosis, and paid lots of money and then found out that, oh no, like her doctor can actually do that. And so what is the easiest route to take for
Yeah,
parents?
that's hard because it's interesting. I'm going to sort of go two different directions. Ideally, a neuropsychologist, because
Okay.
like you get a lot more. Like my son has a 27-page report from that. It's much more intense, very intensive testing, if I may. It's like 2 6-hour days
Yeah.
and all that stuff. But you get to know your kid's brain and how it's wired,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like the good and the bad. I'm like, I don't need all these things. Just give me I want the footnotes.
Yeah. Give me
I
the
don't
summary.
understand all of it. I just need to know. Um, but one of my friends is a psychologist. One of my colleagues is a psychologist, and because there's such, I think since the pandemic, there's such a need to get diagnosis. She and a group of other psychologists are trying really hard to educate pediatricians
Hmm.
on ADHD, because there's a lot of pediatricians that don't really understand ADHD and how to
Hmm.
diagnose it. So psychologists, I think, can diagnose. I'm so used to just the neuropsych.
Yeah.
And I know that obviously pediatricians can provide medicine and but I don't know that there's a lot of pediatricians that really have an understanding of it,
Hmm.
if I may.
Yeah.
And finding the right, if you're a med person, if that's the route you want to take, it's not easy. It's not like our heart or cholesterol where we're all the
Yeah.
same internally. Our neurological by makeup is so completely different that Vyvanse might be a lifesaver for one and it might be horrific for somebody else.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it takes a lot of time for not only just to getting the diagnosis. Once you have the diagnosis, then normally the neuropsych will refer you to a psychologist or a doctor or a pediatrician. And in my case, they went right to a psychologist, and that was a really horrible situation because she didn't even meet my son. She gave me a prescription, assuming that I wanted to medicate him. And I'm not against
Oh,
meds.
yeah.
It was like, here, I read the cliff notes of his diagnosis, and here's a prescription. I'm like, you're not going to meet with him? Yeah,
Yeah. Red flag.
he just needs to be on that and he's fine. And because of that, I've never medicated our son. He didn't
Okay.
want to be. I'm not against it. I think it's very needed in situations, but it has to be the individual's decision.
Yeah.
And it's not most of my private clients are medicated, have a counselor, work with me,
Yep.
and still have a hard time keeping track of everything. So it's only
Yeah.
one piece of the pie of managing it, but I
Totally. Yeah.
not about meds. But so either you, and I know that the wait list is long to get your kids diagnosed. It's ridiculously long.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so I would, see, I don't know, it's been so long since I've been to a pediatrician. I'm hoping that they're more comfortable with doing testing.
Yeah. And maybe that's something that, because our pediatrician did, she was
Okay.
able to do, we didn't know that she could. And so we actually went this other route first. And then we basically got results that were like, well, she could have it, but she might not. And so we need you to pay more money and do more testing. And,
So
okay,
expensive.
we're good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then we contacted the pediatrician and found out she actually could diagnose. But I know that not everyone in our area can. Like, it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah. So I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, would it make the most sense if a parent feels like their child might have ADHD to start with the pediatrician and just ask, like, can we get a
Start there
referral
and
for a
share. Yeah.
neuropsych? Yeah.
Yeah. And I would start there and, share the symptoms, saying, hey, this is what's happening. And I'm sure if anyone else was like me, I don't know how to parent my kid. I feel like everything I'm doing is wrong,
Yeah.
trying all these things. And, the brain just takes so long to develop in those earlier years. And it can be really challenging. But um, I would start with whomever, if it's a pediatrician or a family practice, whomever
Yeah.
your child has been seeing, start there, and they should be able to refer out.
Yeah.
Again, it might take 3 or 4 months to get that
Mm-hmm.
appointment, and it's not cheap, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what I would say, and there are people who don't have diagnosed teenagers and maybe don't want that diagnosis because their teens refusing that, and they're like, "I'm fine, I don't need any," and that's fine. But from an academic, from a school, if you ever wanted to have accommodations, that's when the diagnosis is super important. And I personally believe that a diagnosis doesn't define you. It's not your
Mm-hmm.
problem. It's not your fault how your brain is wired. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. Your brain is wired in a way that there is going to be some life skills that are really challenging for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's why wouldn't you want to know so that you can have the most successful way of approaching it and managing it
Yeah.
versus I'm just going to figure this out or this isn't going to work. And you just constantly are going through different tools at work or just resistance to it. And part of it is just owning it. Like
Yeah.
everyone who I work with is incredibly brilliant, like ridiculously brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
ridiculously
Yeah.
creative. They struggle with turning in their assignments at 11:59 at night, right? So
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, you're good. You don't,
Yeah.
we just have to figure out like these systems for you and things like that. So I would start there. That's what I would do.
So, there's two things that I wanted that kind of jump off of that we touched on in that. One of them
Mhm.
is medication. So if medication is not always the answer and not everybody needs to be medicated, right? We know that. And also, I completely agree with you that there are multiple medications and it's not a one size fits all. So,
Mhm.
having the patience to be able to know, like, it's not going to be, for us, we actually have two kiddos with ADHD. And for us, with both of them, it was like the angels were singing. They're both medicated, but they both wanted that and they both needed that
Yeah.
to be able to just like bring it down enough to focus and then be able to do the things that they need to do to stay organized. But it was that like the angels were singing and everybody around them was like, wow, they're a different kid. Like this is enjoyable to be around this child
Yeah.
and that type of stuff. So from my perspective, I feel like if you go the medication route, when you know that it's the right one. Would you
You do.
agree?
And
Yeah.
that's what when I'm running my parent groups, like part of it is you want your teenager to be really self-aware. How can you
Yeah.
tell the difference? Like what are you noticing in the classroom? Do you take your meds before you get out of bed in the morning to try and help kickstart you getting out of bed and they start kicking in by 8:30? They'll probably start wearing off around 1 or 2. Like tell me specifically how it's helping you, right?
Yeah.
Some will say, I can focus. I feel like
Yeah.
I was a lot more productive. I feel like all the brain, everything, all the doors in my brain just started closing and I could
Yeah.
focus on the task
Yeah.
at hand. And so that's a great sign. Some will say, I don't really feel anything. And that's okay too.
Hmm.
We want obviously them to be able to tell a difference, and that will be very much in focus, very much in being able to complete tasks more efficiently, if I may, and
Hmm.
being able to sit down for or stand up wherever, however that environment is for them to study, being able to sustain attention a bit longer, right?
Yeah.
So I have some students that will take like a 5 milligram at nighttime at 7 to tie them over till
Hmm.
10 to get them through their nighttime work. So a lot of my students are athletes, right? And they're not home
Yeah.
till 7 or 8 or something like that, and they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other caveat with figuring out the ADHD meds is, there's also other meds that these students may be on as well. So
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, what do you treat first? Do you treat the anxiety or do you treat the
Right.
ADHD?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
And it's not an easy, I mean, there's half of my private clients are on anxiety meds as well.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there is the ability to be on both and be very regulated, right?
Yeah.
Um, again, it might take 3 or 4, or maybe a little bit longer, depending on how the body metabolizes that.
Yeah, for sure. What are some alternatives to medication?
So I did a webinar about, managing ADHD, and
Hmm.
if you think about a pie, right? Pumpkin pie or something like that. We just got off
Yeah.
the holidays and what have you. There's probably 6, 7 pieces in a pie, right? So meds is just one part of managing it, right? Doesn't
Hmm.
have to be the be all end all. And the reality is, you and I both know, Melissa, that when our kids are 18, they decide what they want to do.
Totally. Yep.
So if they choose to come off, then okay, then we've got to really have some other systems and
In
routine
place.
and
Yeah.
self-care um, in place. And so part of managing ADHD is the other pieces of the pie, if I may, is having really healthy routines in place, like
Yeah.
having something that our teens are doing every single day that is keeping them stable, that they know exactly what's going to happen, where they can expect it. Sometimes the not knowing fills them with overwhelm and anxiety.
Yeah.
Not know, so it requires parents to be organized as well. Like,
Hmm.
just
Yep.
drop on, your kid on a Thursday night that, hey, by the way, we're going up to the mountains tomorrow.
Yep.
That's not fair and that's not ideal. So having some type of structure, whether it's, hey, we're taking a look at the week, which I
Yep.
think is a wonderful should have to have in every home. Just
Hmm.
let's have a touch base and check out what's happening in all of our world, 5 minutes
I
at the
love it. Yep.
table, 5 minutes or something
Hmm.
like that. And then having whether they have a great nighttime routine or whether they have a great morning routine, something that is consistent because it helps keep these students confident, it helps keep their anxiety at bay, and it
Yeah.
helps them like there's one thing less that they have to worry about,
Hmm.
right? So having routines and structures and the ability to plan and see their time and things like that. That takes a little bit longer. But then
Yeah.
you also think about the self-care,
Hmm.
right? So the sleep, the diet, the exercise. Um, you and you probably know that when you sleep, you produce a lot of these neurotransmitters that help the brain. So lack of sleep, lack of production.
Yeah.
So at any given point, like
It's all related. Hmm.
you are like firing on half of your brain's capacity right now, on half of
Yep.
your brain is offline. So I'm like, oh, just
Yeah.
go to bed now. Like, just go to
Yeah.
bed. Nothing's happening. So, and then obviously the diet part of it is really important because the gut is the second brain because they
Yeah.
also like excuse me, that vagus nerve is, we do produce some
The
of those.
highway. Yep.
Yep. Those neurotransmitters up to the brain, sort of the brain. That's why it's a second brain. So,
Yeah.
um, and then having, the other sort of piece of the pie in that is exercise
Hmm.
and having a community support, right? And that could be working with a coach. That could be having somebody at school, like the 504 counselor or the contact that just touches base with you. That could be a tutor. That could
Hmm.
be a psychologist, right? So we all sort of have our zones of genius, if I may, in supporting these teenagers. But like I say, even to those teenagers who are resisting help, like you can't get through life without help.
Yeah. We
It's a
all need
sign
it.
of strength. So you got to know what you need because there
Yeah.
are people that can help you. And
Hmm.
it's okay. Nobody gets through it without help. But
Yeah.
they have, there tends to be some resistance, excuse me, to asking for help and
Hmm.
to receiving the help.
Yeah. Well, so along those lines, and this was actually the other question I wanted to ask is how do we advocate for our kids' best in the school system? Because I know that sometimes that can feel to our teens like, oh, I don't want to have to go down to the counselor and, ask for whatever is in my 504 plan. But how do we, so it's a twofold question. Like, how do we get those supports in place and advocate for that within the schools? And then how do we encourage our kids to know like it's okay to actually use those supports. You don't have to, it doesn't make you weak.
Right. And so what I have found is that half of my students have no problem asking for their accommodations. And it's not in every class that they need accommodations. It's
Right.
normally in
Yeah.
the handful, 3 or the 4, right?
Hmm.
Depending on the week, they might ask for additional time, but I always say, that should be a default depending on what else is going on. Because sometimes having that additional time, extended time for those of you who aren't familiar, it's normally time and a half. So
Yeah.
if an assignment's due on Friday, you have until Tuesday to finish it.
Hmm.
Sometimes that can really backfire. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's really, so you want them to be very wise and make good decisions about utilizing the time and a half. So half of my students like their 504, they know what they can ask for. The other half are not advocating for themselves
Hmm.
because they just resist it. And
Hmm.
so what I would say is whether they use it or not, it should be in place because I truly feel that eventually they will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and as parents, you need to be part of that. So and I've sat on lots of 504 meetings virtually with some of my students who've been with me for a while and advocating for them as well. And so, from that standpoint, parents need to be highly involved
Yeah.
from getting the right support in place.
Hmm.
The caveat is, even though the teachers get a copy of that, doesn't mean that the teachers always implement it.
Right.
So the student has to really, and that's where they get really
And that's the
uncomfortable
hard part.
because part
Yep.
of advocating, this is what I'm talking about. Like it would benefit you. What would it be like if you got the teacher notes and you wouldn't have to feel overwhelmed in the classroom taking all these notes?
Right.
And they all know that they would feel better. But the thought of reaching out to the teacher, I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, so what would make you more comfortable? Do you want to talk to them or do you want to email them? I mean, I have some teenagers who absolutely have no problem talking to teachers, and I have some that would rather run a marathon than email their teacher or talk to
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
And so it's it's not like you can force your teenager to take advantage of the 504. You can you can encourage them.
Yeah.
I'm in if you had the notes or if you had time and a half when you have such a busy week and you have, a tournament over the weekend and you're not going to have enough time to get your work done. Now, if you would have advocated, you could have had 2 additional days, right? Helping them see what it would
Yeah.
look like when they took advantage of something. So, and some teenagers have it the whole 4 years and refuse to use it. And that's
Yeah.
just those are hard lessons and you can't force your teenager. You have to, even if they, and that what I say is, even if they're willing to talk to one teacher, that's a win. So what
Yeah.
teacher would be the
Hmm.
most easy to
Safe.
talk
Hmm.
to,
Yeah.
safe to talk to, get the support that you need. And then again, it's changing the whole mindset of whatever their narrative because they're stuck in their ways of I don't
Yeah.
help. I feel like everybody's looking at me if I get help and nobody else.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
understand that, but at the end of the day, nobody else is really responsible for their work but them.
Hmm.
And
But them.
that
Yeah.
that comes with maturity, as you and I know. Like
Yeah.
there will be a time that at some point they will have support because that's just life and we all can't get
Yeah.
it through life
For
without
sure.
yeah.
So what about outside of the school? Like, what are some things parents can do to support their kids at home, or as they get their first job, or even like family functions and like trying to
Oh
support.
gosh. The dreaded family
I
holiday.
know. Yep. Yep.
Um, I feel so much of helping our teens thrive and show up is helping them understand the expectations. So I call that front loading. I'm sure you've heard of that as
Hmm.
well,
Yep.
where and I'm like, if there is a big event happening, our son used to hate getting his hair cut. So a month out, hey, I made you an appointment for four
Okay.
weeks. Great. No, nothing. Everything was fine. 3 weeks out. Hey, just wanted to let you know I added you to the calendar 3 weeks. 2 weeks out. Do you know that in 2 weeks? Yep. A week out. On Tuesday, you're getting your hair cut. And literally, like, we went from refusing to go
Yeah.
to not a big deal, leaving, going out and getting his hair
Yeah.
cut.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you do that for everything, but we all know our children and we all know what they need in those situations. So the more that they can be involved and
Yeah.
aware of how they are expected to engage, how they're expected to show up, what
Hmm.
is expected of them, that will be so critical for literally them coming down during Thanksgiving and engaging with family who they haven't seen in a year
Hmm.
and also letting them know that you don't have to spend 5 hours with them. You can go back to your room. Like
Totally. And
time.
that's
We all
okay.
need time, and that's okay.
Yep.
So I think one of the best best, routine, and it's not routines, but strategies is to really involve them, especially when you know that it's going to make them uncomfortable. And what
Yeah.
I found is that it's those social situations where they're like, well, I don't have anything to talk to with these people, and why do I have to go to this? And so, and I've even coached, I have a girl who's really, really introverted. And before Christmas break, I said, let's talk about conversation skills. And
Yeah.
what do you know about your grandmother? Like, she was really nervous to talk to her grandmother. I'm like, what do you know about her? So if you know that she is a gardener and she has 3 cats, what would you just naturally ask her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So helping, you're not lecturing, but you're helping them get,
You're
you know,
coaching
coaching them and
them.
helping them maybe show up a little bit differently in those situations. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say front loading on all the events that are happening. Please do not drop anything last minute unless it's an emergency, unless somebody got an accident, unless somebody's bleeding. Try and
Yeah.
be a little bit
Yeah.
more planned and just keep them involved in what's happening, because
Yeah.
it shows respect. They understand that, they feel like they're a part of it, and they will transition a lot better versus giving you a lot of pushback and
For sure.
refusal of participating.
Yeah.
And then what I started with regards to the emotionality, and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, who's coming in the door? Why was that
Mm-hmm.
so? One of the best, and we probably all know it, but maybe struggle doing it in the moment, is literally just giving them their space when they're
Mm-hmm.
really emotionally dysregulated and triggered.
Yeah.
And look anything like, hey, I see you're having a really tough day. Take a break. I'm here. We're having dinner at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I hope to see you. Right.
Yeah.
The less we say in those situations, the easier it will be for them to calm down, navigate it, process it, come back to you. They probably at the time, 2 hours later, probably have forgotten what was upsetting to them
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
came in. But, when they're really triggered, unless it's something that has to be handled, wait and just validate their upset and give them their
Give
space.
them space. Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
them space, because they can push our triggers, they can push our buttons. I
Mm-hmm.
think part of their responsibility as teenagers is to push our buttons, because
Yeah.
they get a dopamine fix, right? And it's
Yeah.
like reflecting that. So try and be calm in the midst of high emotions. That will win the day every day.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Um, Gosh, I am so sad because our time is coming to an end.
Right fast.
It went by so fast. And I feel like, but you've given us so much information and so many good things to think about. So it was a good conversation. I do feel
Yes,
like we
it
could
was
talk
great
for another
conversation.
hour, but we're going to wrap this up. I actually have two questions for you.
Yes.
So the first one is, what do you wish more people thought about when it comes to neurodivergency?
I think what I said early, it's a brain wiring condition.
Hmm.
It's not, your teen does not wake up wanting to forget, or wanting to be disorganized, or wanting to not be on task and turn their
Yeah.
worlds in and be responsible. It's a brain wiring. And so when those systems and those habits and life skills are lagging, it's not this, hey, I can't wait to make my mom mad today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so when you can take a step back and just look at it from, they're smart, they're not broken, they don't need to be fixed. They probably need a couple little time management skills here,
Hmm.
couple little reminders, which I know will annoy them, but there's different ways of reminding, so be creative.
Yeah.
But just remember, they are trying to meet your expectation, they're trying to meet their own expectation, they're trying to meet teachers, coaches, friends'
Yeah. A
expectations.
lot.
And
So much.
so, parenting with compassion and empathy will allow that connection and allow your teenager to really feel like they're heard and validated, and you're their safe place. So, while sometimes as parents, depending on the day, it can look like there's a lot of things that are not going right.
Yeah.
And so, in those moments when you have this overwhelm, worry, how they're ever going to make it on their own without me, just trust that they will, and
Hmm.
focus on something that they're doing right. Because
Hmm.
in their world, there's so much focus on, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you forgot
Hmm.
this, you forgot that, why didn't this happen? And that just they're tuning you out and they're not listening because they're hearing it, right?
Yeah.
So be
It's
mindful.
overwhelming.
It is. And then
Mhm.
that's, negatively affecting them,
Yep,
right?
for
Which is
sure.
a whole nother stress, worry, anxiety, overwhelm, right?
Yeah.
Um, so be mindful of remembering it's no different than having a heart murmur or something like
Right.
that. You can't
Yep.
help it. It's a neurological disorder. And
Mhm.
I have no problem saying a neurological disorder because we have heart disorders, we have endocrine
Mhm. Yep.
the brain is wired differently and you can't change your brain wiring. You can help
Yeah.
it. Talked about a lot about that today, but it's not their fault. I
Yeah.
thought,
That's good. Yeah. Okay. What about three resources that you would recommend to either parents in general or parents who are parenting teens with ADHD?
mm, resources. Oh my gosh, you caught me off guard with that one.
Sorry.
That's okay. Um,
Do you want me to tell you what you put in your notes?
what did I put in my notes? Probably my freebie, my five
I know,
to
right?
empowering your
The
teen.
Mel Robbins podcast.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh, she's
I
amazing.
love that.
May not be totally ADHD
No,
related, but just, I mean, and I
so
just
good.
new book. I just got a new book.
Did you?
Mhm.
Oh, I haven't yet, but I do listen to her.
I need
She's
to
great.
just really, yeah. What else did
Yeah.
I put in my form? Oh my
You
God.
put try not to let things go and not to control everything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
Yep.
just a mental. Yeah. Let go of some of the small stuff. They're not in your home for very long. And like
Yep.
I said, my son was back breaking the lamps. I was so happy.
Yeah.
Right.
You
I
let
like
it go.
yeah,
Yeah.
just let it go. They're there for a very all that other stuff is replaceable, but not the time you have with them.
Yeah. What
So
about you as a resource? Can you be a
yeah,
resource?
so there's a couple. You can find me on Instagram
Okay.
at Teens with ADHD. And if you
And
go
it's
in,
really good because I follow you and
oh,
everyone
thank
needs to
you.
follow you. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So if you get into my link in bio, you'll see I have a freebie in there called Five Keys to Empowering Your Teenager.
Okay.
Um, I have a lot of new changes in my world of coaching and my business to better support parents. I'm going to be starting a membership coming up here whenever I have the energy to
Cool.
put it all
Yeah,
together.
I feel that.
What else? And I have a parent toolkit that is a like a hugely wonderful. I say that, but it's for parents and teenagers, and there's like 30 some videos, and you can
Okay.
go at your own pace for
Totally.
motivation, study skills, homework
Cool.
stuff,
Yeah.
all my executive function webinars that were recorded, and then
Cool.
my signature course, ADHD 101, and that's $47. And that's like
Okay.
all of that information. So if you have a newly
That's not
diagnosed or
bad.
thinking
Yeah.
about it, the ADHD 101 course is like the foundation and my
Super.
brainchild of everything I learned as I was
Okay.
researching everything when my son got diagnosed. So
Okay. I'll make sure I link that
okay,
course
sure.
in the show notes and how to find you and all of your stuff.
Yeah.
Because I do think that could be really helpful with I just know a lot of the families I work with
Oh, sure.
could find that helpful. So yeah. Okay. Well, I wish we had more time, but we don't. So it is what it is. And I appreciate
You
you
did
and
good.
all that you're doing.
Thank
And
you.
I can guarantee that I'm probably going to have you on again. So just
Oh,
so you
okay.
know,
I can
if
never tire of it. I can't
if
ever
you'll
get
come
away
back,
from
I don't
it.
know. It was pretty crazy. Yeah.
But thank you for all you're doing and for putting on this and producing this podcast and
Yeah,
finding all of your wonderful people to help support
of course.
parents in their parenting journey. I appreciate you too. So thank you.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course. Yeah. Okay. Well, have a great super rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.